This is Fathernetics, the show for queer dads, queer parents, future parents, bonus parents, exhausted parents, and the people still trying to figure out why we volunteered for this lifestyle in the first place. Around here, we tell the stories of everyday people showing up, stepping up, screwing up, learning fast, and becoming somebody's hero along the way. If you're one of the regulars, welcome back to the chaos. If you're new here, this is a surprisingly emotional place for people who also make jokes about Costco and therapy. I'm Jamil, and today we got to talk about foster care, adoption, and the reality behind a system most people don't think about until it suddenly becomes personal. This episode, Rita Soronen, President and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, and I get into what really happens inside of the foster care and adoption process, why older kids are often overlooked, and the emotional reality of trying to build families while kids are still waiting to belong somewhere else. Okay, deep breath. Let's get into it. It's sick season, so everyone's getting sick, some sort of bad cold or flu. It doesn't seem to be the 2020 bug, if you will, COVID-19, but everybody's down in January. Have you been able to kind of scave that off a little bit?
I wish it was over the holidays. We were
Oh
visiting
no.
family in Atlanta and started to come down to something there, drove back, and I had whatever the cold flu combination was for a couple of weeks. It was nasty. And a cough that lingered. We're lucky here today. The cough finally went away. But hopefully it built up some antibodies in my body and that'll be it for the year.
Welcome to Fathernetics, Fatherhood Unfiltered. I'm Jamil. Welcome to the podcast.
You could never find somebody do it like me. I'ma turn it all the way up, cause it kamikaze. Go ahead and try, baby, you are gonna see that you'll never ever find somebody do it like me.
So my husband had it a couple weeks ago, and he was really struggling, and I was like, this is interesting because he gets sick every now and again, but not like this. I
Exactly.
was like, what happened? And then the cough stayed forever.
Yeah, it's nasty. And all I can say is tell him to keep getting some rest. It seems to be the only thing that helps.
Oh, he's back to 100% now,
Oh,
trust
good.
me. But it was he was down
Yeah.
for about a week and a couple of
Yeah.
days. I was like, are you still sick? Like, what's
I know.
happening?
I know. I know. And it never seemed to resolve, but it does eventually.
Well, listen, Rita, I am excited that you are here for a litany of reasons, and we'll probably touch on that as we get through the podcast. But how about you tell us who you are and the amazing things that you are doing with your organization? And I know you've been in your role for quite a bit, so and seen a lot of success during that time. So I'm excited to kind of just briefly talk about that. So, who is Rita?
Well, I am honored to serve as president and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. And you're right. I think I'm going to be, I don't say this too often because it makes me feel really a little bit older than I feel. I've been in this position for 25 years, almost 25 years. And we
That's a
have
success more than anything else, doesn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And we've seen incredible growth. We've seen incredible change throughout the child welfare system that we've had to bob and weave and adjust to. But we're doing a lot of, I hope, really good things on behalf of the children in foster care who are waiting to be adopted. And that's the focus of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. I think it's important to talk a little bit about who the foundation is and why it's here today. It's a
And where
national,
does it come from, right? We all know
yeah,
Dave. So
it,
that's what pops into our heads when we think of the
exactly.
foundation.
Exactly, and we're a national nonprofit public charity. I think with our name and our close association with the Wendy's company, we might feel like a corporate foundation or a family foundation, but we're an independent nonprofit foundation. That means we give grants to organizations and we're fundraising and we have programs. And Dave Thomas his story is so unique. He was adopted as an infant. He was in foster care a brief amount of time, adopted as an infant, but his adoptive mother passed away when he was 5. His father was moving from place to place to get work. And so in the summertime, Dave Thomas was frequently raised by his grandmother Minnie, and that's where he associated and found that I think comfort of family was with extended family members. And when he was 16, he left home. He was tired of his dad moving. He was ready to strike out on his own, and he lived at the Y for a while and found work, and then went into the army. but he always had this notion of family and where the comfort of family is. So, fast forward, he creates this incredible internationally known brand, Wendy's and Square Hamburgers and Frosties. And as he was getting on in his career with
Mm.
Wendy's, he wanted to really put into place what was embedded in the Wendy's DNA, which is giving back to the community. And they decided to create this foundation that would focus on adoption, but it would focus exclusively on foster care adoption because there were big gaps at that. This was in 1992. There were big gaps in knowledge and awareness. Kids were lingering in care for years and years and years. And so they found, I think, this sense that this is a niche where the brand could help with because Dave was still alive and he put himself out on public service announcements and walked the halls of Congress to talk about the gaps. So we build on that legacy of Dave Thomas every day, who always said, and this is sort of my tagline: these children are not someone else's responsibility; they're our responsibility, and we want to make sure we honor that legacy of Dave Thomas in everything that we do.
I always think of the Mandela effect because I think in my mind, like I've seen Dave on TV or I've seen Dave, and I really don't know if I have. I mean, I'm 45. I don't know how long Dave's been gone.
Yeah.
Um, but that's, I guess that's one of the good things. We all associate Dave, not necessarily Wendy's, the restaurant, because I know you said that's a separate entity, but certainly Dave
Yeah,
and his family are associated with this. So let
exactly.
me ask you this. How do you feel things have, or do you feel things have progressed over the last couple of years when it comes to fostering to adopt? Because I went through it myself. We have a 12-year-old that we adopted at 4.
Nice.
So that was roughly 8, 9 years ago. My experience was different than most because I think it was just a sweet spot, right? We got certified, went through that process, which I'll get into more here in a minute. But by the time we got Jacob, he was our first placement from the state, and then he's been with us ever since. And
Nice.
then we've had very minimal push and pull from the parents and the court system and stuff like that. But I know that experience is very unique, and sometimes it can be a little bit more involved. Is that the
Yeah,
right way to say it?
sure,
We'll put it that way.
sure.
So, and I appreciate those because the dads that come on my show also have an opportunity to say, "Hey, I went through foster to adopt, and here was my experience." Because I want people to know it's okay. Everybody's experience is different, but what is the goal? What is the process? What does that look like? What does mentality readiness look like? What does emotional, readiness look like? What does, getting a child and having the goal of reunification be priority while you're still kind of rooting in the corner? And then one of the things my husband has always said is in the foster to adopt process, if the parents are still involved in some way, we're kind of rooting for their failure for our success.
Mm, yeah.
That's a very black and white kind of commentary to have. And it's like, that's not us, but what the child is what we're trying to advocate for. So there's some emotional ties there. Anyway, my original question
Yeah.
was, do we have a positive upward trajectory from, a couple years ago, maybe 10 years ago in the foster to adopt process?
I think there are a lot of ways that things have gotten more positive, that benefit children better than they did a number of years ago. There are still some areas where deep change needs to happen on behalf of these kids. So we'll start from, scratch. Right now in this country, as we're talking, there are about 328,000 children who are in foster care. They're there through no fault of their own. They've been abused, neglected. There are deep
That's such a
issues.
crazy number.
I know. Well, when you think of just we always analogize it to a football stadium. How many people does the largest football stadium hold? You'll still have, if you put all those kids in a football stadium, you'll still have kids sitting on each other's laps in order to accommodate a seat. That's a lot of kids,
That's
and
quite a visual.
they're there because for some reason, whether it's substance abuse in the family or domestic violence or abuse against the child, physical, sexual abuse, or just neglect, the issues of poverty that play into not having adequate housing or food. All of those reasons are reasons kids enter foster care. And it's one of the myths we work to dispel because we take a survey every 5 years of Americans' attitudes toward kids in care and foster care. And 51% of Americans believe kids are there because they've done something wrong, because they're juvenile delinquents. And so that's the first thing we want to talk about is these children are faultless. They have issues of trauma, they have issues of grief, they have issues of loss that they'll work through their entire lives. But if we, when you talk about sort of that mental model of what should somebody think about when they're approaching the foster care system, keep in mind who these children are, what they've experienced, and are you ready to accept that and the dynamics that they've experienced before they came into their family. So 328,000 kids in care right now. The goal is let's get them back home. Children belong in families. We should do everything we can to prevent children from coming into families, and if that's just added resources to get a family into a home, we should work very strongly at that rather than grabbing those kids and bringing them into the foster care system. But for right now, over 100,000 children, the courts see the kids go through this process of the child welfare system, the foster care system, and they get placed. And the social workers work to get them back home. They see what the presenting issues are. They work with the family, and hopefully those kids go back home, and everything's fine, and there's no more involvement in the system. But for over 100,000 children, that process weaves its way through the courts until finally the judge says, we've exhausted all means. This child cannot be safe at home, and we're going to permanently sever the legal rights of that family to this child. And then
Mhm.
those children are freed essentially for adoption. They're available to be adopted. That's more than 100,000 children right now in this country, ages birth to 18, that are waiting for a family to step forward and claim them as their own. So we've got this dynamic of kids in care. What we also know, and this one it's what keeps me up at night, it's what keeps me at this job as long as I have been. 20,000 children, 20,000 of these children who the court has legally severed parental rights, and said, now it's our job to find these kids a family. For
Mhm.
20,000 of them, we fail every year. They turn 18 and they leave foster care without a family. And so we all know the value of family. We all know the comfort and the safety and the guardrails and the learning that comes from living in a family. Imagine being 18, 19, 20, and you're on your own without anybody to give you a hand. If you get yourself to college when the college closes at break time, you've got no place to go. So you're couch surfing and trying to find some place to go. You've got a job and you've got a car to get to that job, and the car breaks down and you can't get to work, and you've got a boss that doesn't care, and suddenly you're without a job, and you're more at risk of becoming homeless. So 1 in 5 kids, the first year that they age out of care, are homeless, and those are the ones we know about. So there are negative consequences for aging out of care. And again, to dispel that myth, not because these are bad kids, because
Right.
they don't have that safety net of family to say, I'll help fix your car. Yes, you can come home and stay with us while you're looking for a job. Here's the better way to do something, think of these things. So that's the conundrum I think we have in the system that works to get better every day. And yet we systemically allow 20,000 children to leave this system without a family and then to fall into potential negative outcomes that creates longer term societal impact than if we had found them a family.
It's kind of inevitable, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we've set them up for failure at that point. And I think there's a part of the system that has to be black and white, and sometimes that gets in the way. These individuals become statistics and numbers and things of that nature, or less humanized in order to get through the process, right? Because we as humans, those not saying this is the case for all of them, but if you're dealing with that number of emotional impacts on a daily basis, you gotta have some guardrails, and sometimes that makes it that black and white, unfortunately.
exactly. And these kids, you start turning, we know from research that the day a child turns 11 in foster care and they've been officially, separated from their family of origin, their likelihood of moving into a permanent family decreases significantly because when people are thinking about a family, they default to infants. they default to younger kids. They want to mold that child in their family image,
Hmm.
and that's absolutely understandable. But I think if we look at the needs of 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds who are still children, who still will thrive and flourish in a safe and loving environment, I think thinking about those older kids is where the foundation puts a lot of their effort. Let's not let those kids age out of care. And do they have baggage with them? Of course they do. And who wouldn't, right?
Hmm.
Are they perhaps defiant or oppositional or hard to connect with? Part of that's being a teen, but part of it is that what they've experienced in the child welfare system, they have no reason to trust adults or family. And so patience, as you're talking about again, if you're thinking about moving into the system, understanding the dynamics and patience with these kids and a willingness to look at maybe, yeah, I've got my sights set on infant. Great, I can accomplish that. But just think for a moment about maybe an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or a sibling group of 2 or 3. It's a lot to ask, I know, but
Hmm.
but just think about those kids and what you have and what systems you have around you that can help support you through a process of something perhaps different than an
Well, I have the one, and so when you say more than one kid, I'm like, I don't know.
infant. I get, I get it.
I don't. I tell people I don't know how single parents do it when they have one, two, three kids, and my hat goes off to them because I'm like, I am. Sometimes I need to walk away from my 12-year-old.
Yep, yep,
So I get it. I get it. And it's a learning experience, from the adult side that's looking to go through the foster care process and foster to adopt. I know from the adult side, there's a lot of learning that happens because it's not a straight line that some parents experience when they have natural childbirth. There are layers, right? You have to, as you mentioned before, kids come with baggage even when they're as young as 3 or 4 or 5, because kids absorb everything. They
absolutely.
see everything. They try to emulate, and oftentimes you get there ahead of the ball and sometimes you're behind the ball and you play catch up for the rest of that child's life. But you have to be ready and willing to learn things like the diagnosis and what it means and how to operate, what coping skills are. Do you have them? Can you share them with someone?
Right,
Do you have the level of patience that you thought you did? Because
exactly.
that's going to be tested as well. So I say that to say, or to ask, the support that you guys give from your agency helps connect with, I say agency, your
That's fine.
your foundation helps to connect with agencies
Yes,
who are then supporting the parents in trying to find kids within the system, because every state is different,
exactly.
right?
And we
Here in
do.
Phoenix, you need to connect with an agency, and then the agency will get you certified, and then they kind of do a handoff to the state social services administration to say this person's ready. Let's work together. I can say that 9 out of 10 back, when I was doing the foster to process, were not very open to LGBTQ couples, and they made it very known, with things like dog whistles, right? Very Christian families. We're looking for traditional families. We're looking for, things like that. But there was one, luckily, that was very much like your organization. It's like, come as you are, as long as you can meet the requirements and you have that grand desire to foster. Let's sit down. Let's have a conversation.
Yep. We've got a model program in place. We call it Wendy's Wonderful Kids because our Wendy's franchisees step forward and do in-restaurant campaigns that fundraise for us in order to allow this program to grow. But it's a model of how do we match children with the appropriate families. And we to date more than 16,000 children who would have otherwise aged out of care. The average age is about 12 or 13 of kids that have successfully been placed into permanent adoptive families through this program because it looks at all of those things you're talking about. Look, we have an overrepresentation of Black and Brown children in the foster care system. We've got an overrepresentation of LGBTQ plus kids in the foster care system. Those are the ones that have self-identified. So many of them don't, and so we've still got these perceptions and biases against classes of people and classes of children in the foster care system that start at sort of that social work or agency level. And so my advice to LGBTQ parents is to make sure you find an agency that's open and willing, and you'll know right away. You absolutely will know right away, and we can certainly help with those recommendations. But we have a presence in all 50 states and the District of Columbia through this Wendy's Wonderful Kids program, and it works fabulously well, and it does exactly what you said. It helps identify those agencies, and we fund those agencies that accept all families in order to move from a child in foster care and into an adoptive home. So it's scandalous to me that there's any bias or effort against a child or against a family willing to step forward, but that's the reality right now. So it's one of those things when you talk about, is the system better? In many ways. Is the system still got room for improvement? Wow. In this way, absolutely.
Well, that's a
Right.
nice way to put it. Room for improvement. I do wonder. I challenge some of those agencies and the mantra that they have, right? Putting families together and building families, and then you present yourself and you're denied for something that is so innocuous. So it's like, are we? Is that the really the goal, or are we trying to build a different America,
Right. Right.
for lack of a better term?
Right.
So you said United States. What other regions are you guys in?
So we're also we have a separate Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption Canada that has the same mission and vision. The mission is dramatically increase the adoptions of children from North America's foster care system. The vision is that every child can have a safe, loving, and permanent home. And so Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption Canada, which I serve as CEO there as well, has all that same tactical implementation, just on a smaller scale. But any dollars raised in Canada stay in Canada. And so we're scaling this Wendy's Wonderful Kids program, meaning we're helping to put in place the number of adoption professionals that can do this model, and it's an evidence-based model for matching children with families. Um, there are enough of those workers in place that any child that could benefit from this intervention has a Wendy's Wonderful Kids. We call them recruiters, but they're not really recruiting. They're looking at where are the best families for this child, and we also have that scaled in Ontario. Just last year, we started a relationship with Puerto Rico as well. So although we're North
Oh yeah.
America, we haven't yet tapped into Mexico. We've got our hands full with Canada and the United States and really fulfilling the vision here. But in the not too distant future, we'd also like to begin to look at how we can have a presence in Mexico.
So do you need to have a presence in that country, from an organizational perspective, right, for you to be able to support families that don't reside in the United States? For instance, if I'm in the UK and I'm interested in adopting, um, in the United States, is that a viable channel, or are there some hurdles to cross there before your organization can work with them?
Yeah, there would be some hurdles, and our presence would probably be different in Mexico. We'd probably be looking at organizations that work on behalf of the rights of children in Mexico rather than trying to do a cross-border adoption, because that the complexities there are can be profound. And,
Fair enough.
we wanna respect the culture that's there wherever we are. We wanna respect the culture that surrounds a child here in the United States. How do we find a family that might be extended family members, that might be the same, race, that is in the same community as a child? We want to acknowledge the child's culture. We'd wanna do the same in Mexico.
So from the other perspective, right, from the child's perspective, and keep me honest here, there are groups within your organization. I think you said recruiters, and maybe this is the folks I'm talking about, and maybe not. Um, are they on more of the child side, saying, "Hey, let me find an avenue to get you adopted"?
They are the child's advocate for adoption, but they also become the parent's advocate so that when a match is made, they work equally aggressively with the family to make sure they have all the resources, all of the understanding that they need as they do for the child. But our understanding of how this works, our drive behind it is let's find the best family for a child, not the best child for a family. Do you see there's a bit of a twist there? Who's going to help support this child best? And we do that by providing all of that support and information and awareness of the family dynamics coming in that are interested in a child.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So how I'm assuming that there's a process that makes it comfortable for uh introductions, if you will, for lack of a better term. Is that like a conference that you guys host or some sort of quarterly event that's designed for that?
So we don't do that so much as the workers have a case file, a caseload of 12 to
Okay, so it's
15.
more specific. Okay.
It's very specific. They're like caseworkers, but they're not the social workers in charge. They're not taking them to court. They're not doing all the checklist things. They're not doing home studies and all of the efforts that you went through. They now have a caseload of some of the longest waiting children, children who have been in care 5, 6, 7, 8 years, who've moved from 10 to 15 homes sometimes. They grab those children onto their caseload and say, "We will find a family for you." And so it works that way, and then they work with the families that have stepped forward, or they do what we call a diligent search. They begin to look through the child's case file. Frequently, they're folks that are already known to this child or extended family members.
So with all of this in mind, you guys work with kids and adults and all trying to do the path of least resistance as best as possible. So I'm sure there's a legal fight side of the house, which I want to touch on just briefly. But what is the culture over at Day Thomas Foundation for adoption? I'm assuming these are some amazing individuals, but I always like to ask and highlight some of the superstars, if you will.
Yeah, I love that you asked that question because I know that someone might argue with me, but I can truly say that I have the best staff of any organization in this country. They are dedicated child advocates. They've come from corporate world. They've come from government. I've got a staff of attorneys. They've come from, different areas of the law, but they all come together here understanding the mission and work every day to make sure that every child has a home. And we have a group of fundraisers and a group of marketers that really look at what's the best messaging that we can get out there so that we can dispel the myths and misperceptions about these children, so that we can draw people in to say, I'm interested in learning more about the foster care system. So it's just an incredible. When I started, we had a staff of 5. Just this year, we're up to
Oh
81
wow.
staff, and it's an incredible, incredible staff of to a person. I again, I would challenge anyone to a person, and they stay. We've got folks that stay here because they love the work.
So what does bring your kid to work look like for you guys? This must be quite the event.
We've got a lot of young families that are, if you know, it seems like every other week we're celebrating family time, new family time.
I love that because not in every organization is there a layer that says your personal life is welcome here, or for like not necessarily for a discussion, but you bring your family, or and some of your staff have probably gone through the fostering to adopt
Oh yeah,
process,
oh yeah.
and they bring their kids, and it's like, let's talk about it, look how cool this is. And so not every company does that.
Right. My general counsel was in the foster care system and was adopted at age 18. She is one of the most ardent advocates for these
Look at
children and
that.
their families. Yeah.
And I think that's cherry on top,
Yeah.
right? If you've gone through the process and you kind of know it from first experience, you get to really see the progress from day one because you've lived it. That I think that's awesome. That's amazing. All right, so I'm assuming there's a legislative arm here. You guys are probably in the fight somewhere in the country to say, hey, let's improve, let's make things better, let's adjust, let's change. What does that look like for your organization, and maybe some of the successes you've seen over the years?
Yeah, we bob and weave in and out of both state and federal activities. State because we have these public-private partnerships with right now 20 states where it's in order to implement the scaling of Wendy's Wonderful Kids, we can't do it all alone as a nonprofit. And these children are in the state's custody. They've got to have skin in the game for making sure. For example, in Ohio, we have 88 or 80 of these recruiters across the state that have finalized adoptions of almost 2,000 children across the state. So they're making,
Uh-huh.
but making sure that what the state's portion is embedded in the budget, it stays in the budget so that this program can sustain. And that's the work that we're doing in a lot of states. So we tend to have it focused on sustainability of this, not the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, but the program that moves these kids to permanency. But we also look at, obviously, anything else, other kinds of pieces of legislation that might negatively impact or positively impact kids in the foster care system. At the federal level, we've done a lot of education on permanency. There's a default right now, and it's a good one, but there's a default to prevention. How do we keep kids out of the foster care system? And then there's a second default to aging out. How do we support those kids who do age out? How do we make sure they can get to college, that they have homes? Those are both absolutely critical. But we're right in the middle that says, once they're there, right now, more than 100,000 children are in care that have been freed for adoption. So how do we assure that they get into permanent homes so that we don't have to have extra funds for aging out? We can put those funds into post-adoption services or whatever a family might need. So we're right now trying to do a lot of education about, let's not forget or neglect those kids that are already in care while we're trying to keep the others out or support the ones who age out. And so we've seen a lot of congressional success on supporting families, on making sure that there are enough resources available so that agencies can function in the way that they do. But I will tell you, child welfare, when it's budget time, is one of the easiest cuts because people don't have children top of mind. And that's what we try to do at a very, um, um, I think, aggressive level. Let's keep the focus on children when you're talking budgets.
And it
Because
becomes very black and white,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's a finger movement with the pen that scratches out a line item, and now
exactly,
you've got, the number you use, 100,000 kids are now at risk. So
exactly,
it's, yeah, I
exactly.
and I appreciate that you guys are trying to infuse some humanity into the process, which oftentimes helps to remind people, hey, these are kids we're talking about.
And look, the biggest advocacy groups in DC are not child advocacy groups. They're energy advocacy groups or they're healthcare advocacy groups. So we're a small group of voices, but I think we can have a powerful impact when and that's one thing we've been looking at. How do we all work together in a much more profound way? I can share one example. There's a group called the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, and it's the nonprofit arm of the Congressional Coalition on Adoption, one of the largest coalitions in Congress, which is just a group of legislators that come together and learn and know as much as they can about all kinds of adoption, international adoption, infant adoption, and foster care adoption. And part of what we support through the nonprofit arm, the Congressional Coalition, is the Foster Youth Internship Program, which every year brings about a dozen to 20 youth who either are still in care or have been adopted from care or who aged out of care, but understand the system that they can inform members of Congress, and they get matched with members of Congress to talk about, to share what their real life experiences were, so that when those members are looking at policy that impacts children, they've got a much better viewpoint having had that intern in their office. It's a profound
Oh,
program.
that's clever.
It's been going on for almost 20 years, I think, and we were one of the first funders of it, and we're really proud to have maintained that. When you think of that many youth that have gone through as interns, it ultimately has an impact on members of Congress in real life.
Wow. Okay. Just hearing that, it's like that's fascinating to have access to read up on, and I'm sure it's somewhere. How do we get more, not necessarily involved, but more informed, right, on what your organization does, has done, will do, so that we can decide whether we want to get involved?
Yeah, yeah. Easiest way is our website, davethomasfoundation.org, and you'll see all of the programs. And we support an adoption-friendly workplace program. One of Dave Thomas's original campaigns was, if you're an employer that provides benefits for families that are formed through birth, why don't you provide benefits for families that are formed through adoption? Simple as that. Paid leave, financial assistance, however, whatever your budget can provide. And so we've built that program and created the 100 Best Adoption Friendly Workplace list. But we're always looking for more employers that can fill out a survey and tell us, what do you do? What benefits do you provide? And by the way, do you provide foster care benefits? Those families need time to get to court or to get them to visits, whatever, get them to therapy. Do you provide foster care or adoption benefits? Tell us about it. We want to celebrate that. And if even if you don't make the 100 best, we've got all kinds of adoption advocate lists that you can proudly show, or certified kind of lists. So we want to make sure that every employer, whether you're for profit, not for profit, government, have some kind of recognition of adoption in the workplace. So you'll see all those programs on our website that we support that surround this conversation of foster care adoption, and hopefully drive people exactly what you said, simply to become more aware. What are the issues? Why are kids in care? How many are there? Then how can I help? What can I mentor a child? Absolutely. Can I foster care? Absolutely. Can I adopt? Of course. But there are guardrails and roadblocks for every process, and we want to help people
Mhm.
through those.
Yeah, it's a thing that's kind of over there until you need it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always make that analogy. It's not real until you're actually like, okay, maybe I'm looking into this, and then it's like I didn't know it was half of what you're saying it is because of the misconceptions and everything that comes with it. So that's I appreciate where people spend the time educating
Yeah.
and at least putting it on record so that people can go find it. In today's day and age, when people have questions about stuff like fostering, adopting, IVF, or surrogacy, they go online and
Yeah.
they Google,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then the first three lines that comes up, whether it's right or wrong, that's what we're clicking on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I appreciate that there's more and more information out there from reputable brands that can say, "Hey, by the way, this is what this looks like."
Absolutely. And for your audience, we have supported for a number of years. There's another group called Gays with Kids, and they do a lot of education on all forms of adoption. And it started out as mostly just for men, but I think they've begun to expand that and be more inclusive for the LGBTQ audience. But a nice,
Now it's kind of funny. I watched the interview that you and Brian had
okay.
recently. So he's a good friend of the show,
Yeah,
and I watch all of his stuff because I support his organization. So it was really cool to see you and him have some conversations.
great.
So
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
All
Look,
right. So given your tenure, what when you think of a foster to adopt, what is that one story that always pops in your head and maybe makes you smile a bit?
there are so many of them, and if folks want to see some, we've got great videos on the website of families that have come together. But there's one story that sticks with me and has stuck with me, and this happened probably 10 years ago. But there was this little guy, maybe 10 years old, who had been in care for 5 years, right? Already been in care for 5 years. But once he hit the Wendy's Wonderful Kids caseload, the Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter started to develop a relationship with him. And he was very shy and very reticent to talk to her. But he finally came around, and the more they talked, he just wouldn't stop talking about his best friend at school, his best friend who didn't really know his circumstances because they're 10 years old and they don't understand this notion of foster families or whatever it is. And so the recruiter reached out to his best friend's family and said, "Hey, he spends time at your house. He adores your son. Is there any way that you might think about maybe taking this child into your home as part of your family?" The family didn't know the circumstances of the child because kids don't talk about it. And they immediately said, yes. Long story short, we get down the road, and this family has been matched together. The little guy's in court now for the final hearing, and he's almost 11, I guess, now. And the judge, if it's a good judge and the child's old enough, they'll go through the whole process, but then they'll take everybody out of the room, and he will talk to the youth and say, "What do you think? Are you okay with this family? Tell me if there are any issues." And the judge shared this with us, and the judge, he looked down, and the little guy wouldn't answer his questions, and the judge kept prodding. He understood, we have to get him to say something. So finally, he looked up, he looked at the judge, and said, "Look, now my best friend is my brother." And that's all he had to say. And the judge said, "Great, bring your family back in. We're done." Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
So it's
I
that it's
love
that
it.
that magic of, it doesn't always happen that way, but
Right.
that's some of the magic that I think that the Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters, because they do that due diligence, they get to know the children on their caseload. They hear from them who's important to them, and they can't promise anything. That the recruiter could not have promised that this would happen for this youth. So she did this a little behind the scenes until it became evident that it would happen. That's the magic. We have others of these kids with one a sibling group of two brothers in Florida, and the youngest child. had been taking care of the older child who had cerebral palsy pretty much on his own as a little guy, because there were substance abuse issues in the family and they were often left home alone. At one point, when the system finally got involved, these two brothers got separated. Well, you can imagine that a little guy that had been taking care of his big brother is separated.
Stress.
Oh,
Yeah.
the profound sense of this is ridiculous. The recruiter, then they were reunited, and the recruiter found this incredible family for these two kids. And there's actually I think a video of this family on the website. They jumped in, and they didn't have a background in taking care of a child with cerebral palsy, but they jumped in because they saw this incredible bond between these two kids. Again, long story short, they were adopted. They're both doing fabulously well, and thriving in this family. So that kids that under other circumstances, the older one may have been institutionalized the rest of his life, and the younger one would have probably been adopted, but would have had that profound grief and loss about his brother for the rest of his life. All of that was mitigated, and they're together for the rest of their lives.
I mean, what an amazing type of human it takes to do A and B, right? Adopt and take care
Yes.
of a child that has special needs. I mean, I think we often forget that that's part of the number as well. You
Yeah,
know, there are a lot of kids in the system that are special needs and require special attention and a set of circumstances at home that allows for that.
exactly.
And then the additional layer of having an adult that may not have done that before,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And now you have to learn it, and you stumble through. You get some of it right, you get some of it wrong. Now there's, all these appointments you got to go to, and on top of dealing with the emotional turmoil of a child that's just come out of a system.
Exactly. And yet, had that child been born to you, of course you would have done all of that. That's what you would have
Right.
done. You would have fought for that child tooth and nail. And so I think it's just making that a little bit of that shift of what if this had been my biological child, and then saying, well, of course, then I'll do this. If the match is right, if the bond is there.
Wow. Wow. And I love, again, that's why I do this podcast. I hear these stories all the time, and it just blows my mind how my experience, I really thought it was similar to most. And when you start hearing people speak in the different ups and downs that they've gone through in order just to have a child,
Yeah.
on the LGBTQ side is quite the road.
Yes, it is. It is. And and we're hoping to make it a little bit better. I don't know if we've gotten there yet, but we're hoping.
I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
We've got time. No,
We
we
did.
don't. I like to say we got time. Technically we do, right? But because there's some sort of a speed number attached to this, we want to make sure we get through some of these hurdles as quickly as possible, hopefully.
And we have to keep in mind these children don't have time. Childhood is lost in just a few quick years, and we want to make sure that every child has a chance for a childhood.
All right, Rita. So on the outro here, what advice would you give someone who is just now discovering that they're interested in adopting through the foster care program, and may decide to reach out or not reach out? They may go a different organization, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Do your research, find out as much as you can. Call the agency or agencies in your area and learn as much as you can about them. And if they don't return a phone call after a couple tries, they're off your list. Make make those connections.
That's good advice. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then do an internal assessment. Do I have the kind of support as I jump into this complex system that will surround me with positive energy, or will make a meal when I need it, or will help with care when I need it? Understand who your support system is, and then be honest with yourself and with your support system. Here's what I can do. Rita said there are siblings waiting to be adopted. I couldn't possibly handle a sibling group. Be honest with yourself, because that's what's going to be the best choice. And then jump in with I think a sense of pride that you're helping in your community some of the most vulnerable children around. And if you decide I can't, I don't have the fortitude right now to adopt or even to foster care, there are other ways to help. You can become an advocate. You can talk to your legislature and say, what do you, or when, we're going to hit election time again. That first question you should have of a candidate is, what are you doing for children? And what is your your policy platform for children. You can mentor, you can volunteer, you can go to an organization and buy, holiday gifts at holiday time. There's so many ways to jump in and learn about it and then decide this is what's best for me. I'm ready.
That was well said. You dropped a couple of things in there, and it's be honest with yourself. I think that's important.
Yeah.
We sometimes go into things thinking we're going to be superheroes or we're rescuing,
Yeah.
right? We're saving people,
Absolutely.
and certainly there's a glimmer of that in this process. But be real with yourself. Can you
Yeah.
really handle a child in your home right now? Should we wait till next year? Is that a better
Exactly.
situation?
Exactly.
Can you do siblings? Is what is your hang up? Like, really understand that. I think one of the things that I always remember going through the fostering process here is the checklist that they give you when you try to get certified that
Oh,
says what you are interested in and what you're not, right? And it's less of what you're not and what you really are interested in. And you kind of have to say, a child of this age, of this race, of this, and it's a humbling experience because it feels like a shopping list, and it's a person you're referring to.
yeah. 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 No, that's a great way of putting it. But in order to make that the best thing possible, use that voice at the front end, in the middle, and at the end. Advocate for yourself. And I think the last piece, if you do adopt from foster care, do not feel ashamed to ask for help. Again, these children have
Mhm.
profound layers of trauma and grief and loss, and it may not show up right away. May not show up for a couple. May not show up until they're teens. Understand what's behind what's showing up, and ask for help.
Definitely ask for help because when it shows up, those issues and challenges, you may not readily identify it. You might misidentify it as a
Yeah.
behavioral
Yeah.
issue
Yeah.
and then completely miss the opportunity to address it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Oh man. That's been the joyous ride of really learning some of these diagnoses and
Yeah.
going, okay, now that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It
Exactly.
really does humble. Well,
Exactly.
listen, Rita, I've taken up enough of
Oh,
your time. This has been such a fantastic conversation to really understand what your organization is doing here in the United States and in Canada and being advocate for these kids that are still in the system today and are looking for that amazing forever home sometime here in the near future. So fantastic job you and your team are doing.
oh, thank you. And it's been great talking to you. And congratulations on that you jumped in and you did this. Yeah.
I know this is quite the journey. I'm excited about it. I'm still new at it, but it's fun. So I'll do this until it's not fun anymore.
Great. Great. Thank you.
All right, Rita, thank you so much.
You bet.
Do it, do it, do it.